There. Hi. It is Saturday evening, Friday, September 1st. I am sitting here in this beautiful seating area outside of a Starbucks downtown in Copley Square. I've been here for a few hours just attending to business, working on some paperwork and having a beverage and getting stuff done. Called my dad to check in on him and had a nice chat. And the reason I'm making this video is because earlier this afternoon, when I was getting ready to leave my building, sometime between 12:30 and 2:30 p.m., I was in the process of getting ready to leave, and I suspected that there was somebody sitting in the vacant, empty bathroom directly behind the wall of my toilet. There's a psychotic stalker and a malignant sex offender who used to live in that bathroom for 9 years, was moved out recently about 10 months ago, but I suspect continues to access the premises of their old bathroom, which is right behind, again, the wall of my toilet. So I started literally shouting and screaming and, yelling insults at the wall because I suspected there was a malignant sex offender sitting directly behind the wall of my toilet while I was trying to use my bathroom to get ready to leave my building. I did leave my building at around 3:15 p.m., had an urgent obligation to take care of downtown, did make it to the obligation, but barely, with like 15 minutes to spare. And so while I was getting ready, this person, as I was suspecting, was sitting behind the wall of my toilet. And the reason that I was screaming and shouting nonstop for maybe 15, 20 minutes was because I wanted to literally smoke out the person who was smoking behind the wall of my toilet, which is an empty, vacant unit. Nobody should be in there, but this person is a psychotic stalker and a malignant pervert, and they like to sit directly behind the wall of my toilet in the bathroom of their former unit, which they're not supposed to be in. Duh. And so that's why I scream and shout. People think that I'm insane because I do a lot of screaming and shouting sometimes, but the screaming and shouting is very deliberate, and I am completely able to stop whenever I want. I can pull it back immediately. I stop and I walk away. It's not a psychosis. It's not some kind of bipolar situation. I'm not bipolar. Like, that's a fact. I don't get manic. I don't get depressed. I don't have any depression issues. Sometimes I have a little bit of anxiety because there's a lot of things have got a little crazy since the pandemic. People are more aggressive. There's a lot more things that don't work anymore. Businesses closed. Things have changed. A lot of stores closed earlier. So I think being somewhat stressed since the pandemic is normal. But I'm definitely not bipolar. I don't get manic. I don't go on these crazy spending sprees or I'm being awake for days. I mean, that's all manic stuff. I'm certainly not manic, but I'm also not a depressive. So anybody who watches my channel knows I put out new videos every couple of days or so, and I'm perfectly fine in them. So, and now I'm out and about and enjoying my evening, and things are perfectly fine because the shouting and screaming that I do, and I'm assuming that, if anybody can hear me, it doesn't sound good, but I don't really care. I'm literally trying to smoke out the person who I suspect is constantly sitting behind the wall of my kitchen sink, which is also the same bathroom that shares a wall with my toilet area. And I'm usually right. I mean, when I suspect that this person is sitting behind the wall of my toilet and I start screaming and shouting and saying some really inflammatory comments, they get all agitated and they respond from behind the wall where I suspect that they're creeping and stalking and perving. So I'm right about that. And so, again, the screaming and shouting is deliberate. It's not some kind of temporary insanity. I stop immediately. I can walk away and just keep doing whatever I was doing. But it is my way of provoking whoever I believe is sitting behind the wall of my toilet. And I am almost always right. There's always a reaction from behind that wall when I start making really inflammatory comments that nobody should be able to hear if they're sitting behind the wall, right? So in my building, you can hear people screaming and shouting, but you can't hear the words that they're saying because the wall does block a lot of the pronunciation and words that people are saying. Nobody should be able to hear the words that I'm saying unless they're actually standing outside of my door. And that's when you can actually hear word for word what people are saying, is if you're standing in the hallway outside of their door, because the door is thin, it doesn't have any insulation. But the walls between units, you've got two pieces of drywall and some insulation, so you should not be able to hear word for word what people are saying in their units unless you're using some type of a surveillance device that is like an audio surveillance device. So that's what I suspect is happening. And that's why I also make some really inflammatory, nasty comments, because the psychotic creep directly below in 76 likes to make violent, sudden banging noises directly underneath my bed when I'm lying on my bed and talking to family members and making, nasty comments about the people in my building. The creep directly below evidences um, some type of auditory surveillance by making violent banging noises whenever I talk about him, or whenever I talk about the psychopath next door in the bathroom of 78, a sex offender named Jasmine Irizarry. So if I talk about him or about Ms. Irizarry, the psychotic sex offender stalker who's always sitting behind the wall of my toilet, then he makes violent banging noises. So my theory that there are surveillance devices in my bathroom and in my living space is proven correct when I start screaming and shouting at the wall behind my toilet. The psychopath and sex offender who likes to sit behind that wall gets really agitated directly against the wall when I make all kinds of inflammatory comments. And then the thug below in 76 starts making violent banging noises directly beneath my bed when I'm lying on my bed, talking on the phone to family members or whoever, and talking about him or talking about Jasmine Irizarry, who sits directly behind the wall of my toilet. The two of them seem to be working together. I think they're part of the same activist group. It's actually just a bunch of career criminals who pervertedly creep and stalk and hate stalk people who don't look like them. If you get my drift, they don't look like me, and they don't like me because I don't look like them. So they hate stalk me, and they have absolutely nothing going on in their sad, wasted, useless lives. So they just spend all their time hate stalking people who don't look like them, who they're jealous of, who make them feel like the pieces of crap that they actually are. So that's why I scream and shout. It's not an insanity thing, it's a deliberate tactic. And anybody who knows me well knows that I am certainly not bipolar. I don't have any temporary psychosis. I do things very deliberately and very scientifically and strategically. And screaming at the wall and hurling insults and making inflammatory comments is my way of trying to like draw out the stalkers and creeps who I suspect are sitting behind the wall of my toilet and using surveillance devices to eavesdrop on what I say and do in the privacy of my apartment. So that's why I scream and shout. I mean, I spent 20 minutes screaming and shouting earlier this afternoon. I'm perfectly fine now. I left my building at 3:15, attended to urgent business downtown at the courthouse, was perfectly fine. Everything was fine, right? But when you think that somebody's sitting behind the wall of your toilet, creeping and perving on what you're doing, and you want to make sure that there actually is somebody behind that wall, all you need to do is start making nasty, inflammatory comments. And when they start getting like all agitated behind the wall, you know you're right. And I'm always right when it comes to that situation. So yeah, that's why I scream and shout.